If you missed it last night in Houston, this is what James Harden did to the Miami Heat.
Harden on the move, through the lane, lefty lane, going 14 straight. Rockets points, 117, 113. What a quarter, what a second half, what a night for James Harden. 58.
58 points on the Rockets radio network, propelling Houston to another victory. And in James Harden, in the process, strengthening his MVP case in what has been a three-horse race, Dahntay. And now as you see it last night, I'm wondering this question. Did James Harden strengthen his case by scoring 58 in a win against the Heat? Or was Paul George's case maybe strengthened by not playing at all as Oklahoma City ends up losing to the Philadelphia 76ers? Because these are the topics of conversation that we have now in March.
James Harden kept himself in the race. You understand what I'm saying? Because it was looking like Giannis and Paul. James is having an unbelievable season. He's doing his best to keep his team in the pursuit of that third seed. But the Oklahoma City Thunder didn't look the same without Paul George. And that's showing that that's a strong team, but they are not at the same capacity without their leading scorer, Paul George, and the guy who brings it on a nightly basis. This is, as you said, a three-horse race, and you got to go to – I think Giannis wins this race. I think he's because of the winning of his team.
Sure.
His team has the best record. And if you base that on the seasons before, you got to go with winning, and I think Giannis gets it. But it's a great race going to the end of the stretch. You never know what guys can do coming down the stretch.
And this is all part of the conversation, because last night the city of Houston is saying, all right, you could talk about your Paul Georges and you could talk about your Giannis being the top seed in the East. None of those guys are dropping 58. There was even
absolutely correct.
Yeah, there was a graphic that shocked me on the Rockets TV after the game, where it was highest scoring games by a Houston Rocket, and it was James Harden, James Harden, James Harden, James Harden, James Harden. Like that to me is absurd. So the numbers that he's putting up are crazy.
So if they take over the third seed, does he win it in your mind? Does he bump Paul George down a slot? How does this work out in your perception?
And that's what's funny is I actually thought last night, to your point, that for as great as James Harden was, Paul George's value was shown in a loss to the Philadelphia 76ers because of what you're missing. And you get that. And you can even go back to just a week ago, last Saturday, when the Rockets beat Golden State without James Harden. That probably was the worst case that you could make for James Harden of being an MVP, because when the race is this close, you get to value. Right. And that's what we go down to. But it's most valuable. It's not the best. It's not the best score.
Defining the terms. That's that's what we're looking at. And when you look at Giannis and Paul, they do it on both sides. Defensively, OKC wasn't the same team without Paul George. And if Giannis jumps out the lineup for Milwaukee, they won't be the same team without Giannis on the defensive side of the floor. They bring it on a nightly basis on the offensive and defensive side of the floor. James is playing one side of the floor, but he's doing it the best. So that's what keeps him in the race. So that's but Giannis and Paul are at the top of my list because my personal values. I value defense. I value how that comes into winning championships and putting yourself in the conversation to win a championship. And they do it on both sides, two-way players.
And there's been an argument that LeBron could have been the MVP of the league for the last 10 years.
Of course.
If you wanted to. Do players dive into this debate? Do they care? Do they sit there and say, Harden's great and all, and he had 58, but he's not playing the half of the court that I play? I mean, is that an issue?
It would be an issue, but it wouldn't be something like he's still in my mind at that 3 slot of MVP because he's playing one side of the floor. That's how dominant he is on that side of the floor. It's not like he's not giving an effort, but he's not dominating on that side of the floor or giving that type of effort. You understand that? Like, I got paid to play defense. Yeah. One side of the floor. That was my job. And you got a guy out there doing the leading scorer and doing my job. Sure. He has two. He has a part-time job that he's doing on the defensive side of the floor, and he's doing it at an efficient level. Like, those two guys are amazing, man.
And nobody's saying Dahntay Jones for MVP because he had a great defensive night, right?
Right.
So I guess if you're a player and you're saying, well, that's what Harden's doing in the offense, maybe there's guys at the association that are also doing it on the defense. Just a couple of numbers because of the ins and outs of how the MVP is broken down. When I mentioned that James Harden and the Rockets win when he has 58, but they also beat Golden State. Rockets are 2-2 without Harden this year. Paul George missing just his second game of the season. It was the first time that they lost, but they beat Phoenix earlier. And you and I could beat Phoenix, I think, right now.
We could do something.
Yeah, we could at least be competitive in the fourth quarter. Bucks are 3-2 without Giannis. So there's no way that anybody is going to compare to what James Harden did number-wise.
Right.
Like you can't compare to 36.5 points per game. But what you can do is what you mentioned off at the start, and that's look at the standings. And I think when you look at Giannis tonight has an opportunity, and it's kind of we're in this vortex of real MVP opportunities because Giannis is on a big stage. Mm-hmm. They're in LA. They're taking on the Lakers. It's a national TV broadcast, and it's another opportunity to show everybody who Giannis is. And realistically, Giannis probably has had the least amount of opportunities to do so on a national scale for the exposure that the Rockets can get. Listen, the Bucks haven't been playing Saturday night ABC games,
right.
So this is really an opportunity for Giannis to make his case for an MVP when there's also so much going on with the Lakers, which is a separate conversation. But we could have a lot more clarity with the MVP with what's happened in this last 24 to 48 hours.
So if Giannis goes out and dominates tonight, playing against a Laker team that needs an amazing performance from LeBron James, Giannis goes out there and dominates. And let's say he dominates LeBron James.
Okay.
Do you put him at the top at that point in time?
Yes. I still like.
That's a head-to-head matchup.
Yeah,
right there.
I still like Giannis number one for the simple fact of, and I know recent history shouldn't play a part in this, but I think it did with Russell Westbrook last year. When he won the MVP, we looked at the triple doubles and said, "Oh, he's just doing that again."
Right.
Like that's just the same old thing. I think we look at James Harden, and while he isn't doing the same thing again because he's doing it at a better level, we're not seeing anything different that we haven't seen before, just maybe seeing it on a greater scale. I think Giannis's domination and what Paul George is done to Oklahoma City and elevating them. I mean, the Rockets, remember last year, were the top seed in the West, and now they're sitting there in the 5 spot. So you could say that Houston, took a bit of a dip, which may be no fault to James Harden. But the point is, Giannis is different and Paul George is different, and that's why I think that those two right now are kind of have separated themselves from what James Harden has done.
Playoff performances are going to play off in this race as well. How they do in the playoffs and how they stack up against the powerhouses, and if they can translate this into wins in the playoffs, I think that's going to play into Paul George's case and Giannis's case as a number 1 seed going in. Because if they don't do what they're supposed to in the first and second rounds, then
voting will be done by then. But
will it?
Yeah. So it's regular season only. They just only do it. They just announce it at the end.
I can't believe that. I really can't believe that because it comes out way later.
It does. But remember what they used to do? Remember when there would be like a Western or an Eastern Conference semifinal game that have to hand out an award before the game? Because they would do it like now they do it at the NBA
right. So
awards.
I'm a conspiracy theorist person right here. So I'm thinking
it's
like, because if a guy gets knocked down in the first round, you still think he gets MVP?
Yeah.
Let's say Giannis. Giannis gets knocked out in the first round.
Yeah, I think
and it gets swept. I think he could still be MVP.
I think it'll be a very watered down ceremony. I think that the NBA honor show would be very different. I don't think you could rig the voting, Dahntay. You just don't think it would be a good look for the NBA to have your MVP be ousted in the first round,
right?
Yeah, it's the danger of it. It's the danger of it. But Russell
Maybe
Westbrook,
crazy.
They were ousted in the year that he had the triple double season.
Okay,
so that could be the possibility. I will say this though. The Bucks are 3-2 without Giannis. They had a tough. They were destroyed by Orlando, and they played a couple of weeks ago in a game by 20. They lost by 20 points at the Bradley Center. But for the record-wise, Milwaukee is actually best without their star. Houston, I mentioned 2-2. Paul George 1-1. But as you're sitting there trying to figure out the real value of an MVP, these are the things that you have to dive into for the simple fact of Harden's been so great scoring. Giannis has lifted his team to a whole new level, and now we've seen that Paul George has carved himself out of a whole new niche. You can't compare the three, so this is how you got to break it down.
So what we have here is you have a set of players that can be formed to what your personal perspective of the game of basketball is.
Yep.
So we all can have a different opinion of who the MVP is, but we all won't be wrong. So if you said Giannis and I said Paul, like I can create a story for Paul and you create a story for Giannis, and then someone else is James, you can create that as well. We all wouldn't be wrong because I think we have 3 stars right now who will put on amazing performances, and it's just your perspective, how you view the game of basketball, what you value in basketball, and I think that tells you what your vote is going to be. And whoever wins it wins. I think his prize will be this year getting that first team All NBA slot that LeBron James usually is sitting at. LeBron James won't be first team All NBA this year because of injury, number one, and because his team is not doing what they're supposed to in the sense of all basketball purists. Yeah. But Paul George will be first team All NBA at the small forward slot, and rightfully so.
He's Dahntay Jones. I'm Dan Beyer. He's an NBA champion. I am not, but we both are on Twitter. I'm at Dan Beyer on Fox. You can get Dahntay at Dahntay1, and you can also tweet the network at Fox Sports Radio.